All right, let's talk about something fascinating. We're going to dive into the invisible forces that are constantly, quietly regulating our every move. Think of them like silent rules running in the background of your mind, giving some of your impulses a green light while stopping others dead in their tracks. So let's get right into it. So, let me just ask you this, straight up. What actually stops you from yelling on a quiet train? Or, I don't know, grabbing a French fry off a total stranger's plate? There is a powerful system at work inside of you. And honestly, it's way more fundamental than you might think. The answer? It's something we can call mental censorship. And look, this isn't about being good or bad, not at all. This is a basic survival tool hardwired into us. Before your brain even gets around to asking, is this the right thing to do, it's already asking, is this safe? Is this going to work out socially? It is our essential, nonstop filter for navigating reality. So, how does this inner sensor actually do its job? Well, it doesn't just use cold hard logic and reason. Nope. Instead, it wields two of our most powerful social emotions as its main tools. And what are those two emotions? They are shame and guilt. Now, you might think they feel kind of similar, but they operate in fundamentally different ways. You can think of them as the two faces of our internal emotional police force. So let's really break this down. Think of shame like an external police officer. It's all about what other people think, about social judgment. And it's brutal because it focuses on your entire self, making you feel like you are flawed, like you are exposed. Guilt, on the other hand, is more like an internal detective. It's your own moral conscience judging a specific action. See the difference? It's not about who you are, it's about what you did. The engine of shame runs on this one single question: what will people think? This is all about fearing negative social judgment, that deep, primal fear of losing your status, of being cast out of the group. It's a system that regulates us from the outside in. Now, guilt asks a totally different question. It turns the camera inward. Did I do something wrong? This has nothing to do with public opinion. It's all about your internal moral compass. The focus shifts completely away from protecting your reputation and toward repairing whatever harm you might have caused. Okay, so these systems are incredibly powerful in each of us as individuals. But what happens when you scale them up to organize entire societies? Let's zoom out and take a look at how whole cultures have used these forces to maintain social control. If you look back through history, there's this really fascinating shift. In ancient small-scale societies, villages where everybody knew your name and your business, reputation was everything. So these became powerful shame cultures, regulated by honor and the constant watchful eye of the group. But as societies grew into huge, sprawling cities, that system just started to break down. I mean, you can't rely on village gossip to keep people in line in a city of millions, right? It doesn't work. This is where large world religions introduced what was frankly a revolutionary technology: the internal conscience. Concepts like sin and divine judgment literally moved the surveillance system from the town square to the inside of your own head. The observer was no longer just your neighbor, it was an all-seeing God, or your own ever-present guilt. Okay, so we've seen how this works on a huge social level. Now for the really cool part. Let's pop the hood and look at the actual machinery, the wiring inside the brain that makes all of this happen. So, picture this. It all happens in a fraction of a second. First, an impulse bubbles up from the deep emotional parts of your brain. Instantly, the brain's conflict detector, this area called the anterior cingulate cortex, it flags it like, whoa, potential problem here. Then the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like the brain's CEO, weighs all the consequences. And finally, a decision is made. Block it or let it through. And this whole process isn't happening in just one spot. It's a whole network, a team, really. You've got the amygdala generating that raw impulse. The ACC is on conflict monitoring duty. The insula makes you actually feel the weight of the emotions involved. And then the prefrontal cortex, the boss, makes the final call. It's this constant, high-stakes conversation happening inside your head all the time. Now, this system is incredibly effective, most of the time. But it's not perfect. It's not foolproof. So what happens when that sensor becomes way too rigid, or when we try to push back against it way too hard? Well, there's this famous old experiment in psychology that just perfectly illustrates the whole paradox of trying to control your own mind. Researchers told a group of people one simple rule: for the next few minutes, whatever you do, try not to think about a white bear.
And of course, what happened? The white bear is all they could think about. This is called the ironic process of mental control. And why does this happen? Well, because in order to not think about something, part of your brain has to constantly scan for it to make sure you're not thinking about it, which, of course, keeps the thought active and right there in your mind.
So when we try too hard to just suppress our thoughts and feelings, that energy doesn't just disappear into thin air. It rebounds. It can pop back up in really unexpected ways. Sudden emotional outbursts, weird symbolic dreams, or even acting out in the exact way you were trying so desperately to avoid. Long story short, forcefully suppressing this stuff often just backfires big time. And this really brings us to the main takeaway of this whole thing. The goal isn't to create this iron-fisted sensor in your mind that just crushes every single impulse. A healthy mind isn't one that has no bad thoughts. It's one that can manage them with a flexible balance, one that can acknowledge an impulse without always having to act on it. And that leaves us with one final, and I think really provocative question to think about. In our hyper-connected world, with social media creating this kind of global village, where anyone can be publicly judged by millions in an instant, are we seeing a shift? Are we moving away from internal guilt and back toward a global culture of external public shame? And what does that mean for how we regulate ourselves and each other? Definitely something to ponder. Thanks for joining me.